I do have a father. There has never been a father in my memory. So not having a father was normal for me, and I took it for granted. My mother's life was not simple. She was a single mother who gave birth to me at a young age. And since I was always sick, we always had financial problems. As a child, I was hospitalized many times. Each time I was hospitalized, my mother would pat me on the head and say, "Don't worry about it."
With that, she would smile kindly at me.
I adored her smile and how she patted me so much that just looking at them made me forget about my physical discomfort. She was caring and kind, and I loved her. Of course, money is not everything, but I wanted to help my mother when I grew up. As a child, I always hoped that one day I would be able to repay my mother for her generosity. Perhaps my body responded to my wish, and as I grew older, I stopped returning to the hospital. Gradually, I began to have my own dreams. I wanted to be a doctor. Perhaps my past experiences had made me think that way. I wanted to help children who were suffering like me or more than me. That's what I began to desire. But to become a doctor, you have to go to medical school. And medical school is expensive. I was worried. My family's financial position would not improve no matter how strong my body developed. If I went to medical school, I would be putting a great load on my mother once more. My mother had always supported me. Therefore, I hesitated to tell my mother about my selfish dream. But seeing me like that, she asked me, "What's wrong? If you have a problem, tell me about it." I told my mother about my dream. She didn't hesitate at all.
You are free to do whatever you want to do.
She said so with a kind and warm smile. I was so happy that I hugged her and cried. And I promised myself in my heart that I would become a doctor and compensate my mother for all she had done to me. From then on, I stopped doing whatever my classmates did and focused solely on my schoolwork. I was determined to pass medical school and become a doctor. I kept the pen in my hand to attain this aim, and I was able to realize my ambition by passing the entrance exam for medical school at my desired university. But things were only going well up to this point. My mother grew ill as a result of all the hard work she had to undertake up to that time. Fortunately, she was not hospitalized, but she had to take a lot of time off work, and her income decreased. I was able to save money from my part-time at home, but it wasn't enough for us to live a regular life. I had no way to pay for next year's tuition with that money alone. I didn't want to give up on my dream, but I could not continue to stay at the university if I did not have the means to pay the tuition fees. I looked for a way to stay at the university, and when I discovered a couple of options to stay at university, I received a significant sum of money in my account, $2,100 plus next year's tuition. I was more horrified than surprised by the suddenness of the transfer, so I discussed the matter with my mother.
I'll do some research, so don't touch the money.
A few days later, my mother told me about the money. She told me that she had found out where the money came from. And she assured me that it was safe money and that I need not be concerned. Where did this money come from? I was concerned and asked her, but she laughed, somewhat troubled, and said, "Don't worry about it. Please feel free to use it, and from now on, $2,100 will be transferred to your account every month." She said so. I was astonished by the tuition amount alone, but the thought of $2,100 being transferred to my account every month from now on was unbelievable. But I opted to trust what my mother stated. However, I was left with a nagging feeling in my heart. However, considering the current situation of my family, I had no choice but to rely on this money. I believed my mother's words and used the money for tuition and living expenses. From then on, I continued to receive annual transfers of school fees as well as the monthly payment of $2,100 as promised. My mother refused to tell me where the money came from, no matter how many times I asked. I never found out where the money came from, but I did pass the exam and become a doctor. Now I was able to repay my mother for all she had done for me. I could give her a more comfortable life. When I became a doctor, I told my mother first about it. She was very happy, but she had a sad smile on her face, which bothered me a lot. "What's wrong, Mom?"
No, it's nothing. Nothing.
No matter how many times I asked, my mother would just give me that answer and would not tell me anything else. And one day, after a few days of not knowing how she felt, a luxury car pulled up, and a well-dressed couple got out of the car. "Can I help you?" I said to the two people I did not recognize, and the woman suddenly hugged me. "Hey, what's your problem? Please let me go." Without understanding why, I tried to pull her away, but the woman, on the contrary, strengthened her hold on me. And the man standing next to her nodded as he watched us. I didn't know what was going on. I got scared and asked my mother for help. "Mom?"
Yes?
All of my words and all of my gaze were directed at my mother. Nonetheless, I heard the response from someone who was hugging me. "What are you talking about? Let me go."
Oh, why? It's been a long time since we last saw each other.
"It's been a long time? What are you talking about? Just let go of me."
Oh, are you perhaps nervous?
Oh, I'm sure she is. It's been a while.
I really didn't understand what was going on. The woman, and then the man next to her, said things that I didn't understand. I looked at my mother again, but she looked away from me and turned her head down. "Lan?"
What is it?
The woman answered again in my ear.
I am your mother.
"What?" The woman then let me go and looked at me with the man.
You are a child.
"I don't understand what you're talking about."
Oh, you are a surprisingly adult child. He's literally saying the truth. We are your parents.
"What do you mean?" I couldn't understand. It was impossible to understand everything they said. But the two people who identified themselves as parents were looking at me with smiles on their faces as if it were natural. I fearfully looked at my mother once more.
They are telling the truth.
My mother nodded, looking away from me. My mother would never tell such a bad lie. Knowing this well, I believed her words. And at the same time, I despaired. "I'm not your daughter."
I'm sorry.
I turned away from my mother, who apologized, and now turned to the couple. The couple seemed to realize what was going on.
You really are a daughter, but no wonder you don't recognize us. You were given to her as soon as you were born.
My mind was in a panic, but the conversation went on, ignoring me. According to the couple, their family had been a family of doctors for generations. It was a given that you would become a doctor because you were born into their family and had no other option. I was born into such a family, but for some reason I was sent to my current mother, and my mother was not officially my mother, but a distant relative of the couple.
I let you in her care before you could even remember. No wonder you don't remember any of that.
For as long as I could remember, I never had a father. I always lived alone with my mother, and I thought she was the only family I had. But I guess I was wrong. My mother was never married from the beginning. She had never given birth to a child. And why was I sent to her?
Oh, that's simple. Because you fell sick easily.
Being a doctor is a difficult job. It's a demanding job.
But you were born too frail to be a doctor.
But you see, we were wrong. You grew up to be such a fine doctor.
I didn't understand what they were saying at all. I kept repeating their words over and over in my head, and then I finally squeezed the words out. "So you were here to pick me up? Because I'm a doctor now?"
You see, you have a brother. I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but he never became a doctor. Not only did he not pass medical school, he failed every exam after that.
We realized that he'd never become a doctor, but then we heard about you.
I had a bad premonition. No, it wasn't a premonition.
We didn't think you could be a doctor, but we heard you were starting to be a doctor, had graduated from medical school, and were doing well.
Then we thought it was better to have high hopes for you than for a kid who wasn't as good as you.
When they told me that much, I finally realized what was going on. That money was transferred when my mother collapsed and I needed to pay my tuition fees. That money must have been transferred by the two of them. They say high hopes, but this was not the case. It was just an investment of the money they had been putting into their incapable kid, which they decided to put into me instead. And my mother knew this. That's why she assured me that the money was secure.
Now, do you understand why we're here?
Yes, I do. I understand very well.
Okay, then you'll be living with us from now on.
This couple comes from a family of doctors. As a future doctor, this was probably the ideal environment for me in a sense. I would be able to gain knowledge, abilities, and experience that no one else could. But
You go pack your bags.
I'm not leaving here.
What do you mean?
I mean it. I will not go with you two.
What are you saying?
The couple looked at me in awe at my words. It was obvious, because these two people abandoned me, their daughter, in the care of a distant relative because they feared I would never become a doctor. And they did not even contact me once. Let alone meet me. And then, as soon as they discovered that the child they were expecting was not suited for a doctor, they came to retrieve me, whom they had placed in the hands of a relative so long ago. They may be good doctors, and probably very smart, but there was something wrong with these two. They were incorrect as people, and above all, if you are really my birth parents, my real parents, then you abandoned me. And it was my mother who raised me. My mother was always there for me while I was in the hospital when I was alone and lonely. She was there for me when I needed her. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue my goals. I am grateful to you two for giving birth to me, but I have only one mother. She is my family, so I won't go with you guys. I clearly looked them both in the eye and told them. Then they both simply left the place. They were the type of people who'd abandon their child merely because she couldn't become a doctor. So I assumed that if I didn't do what they said, they wouldn't need me either. And I think they didn't care about me. After they left, my mother apologized to me. I hugged her. Mom, thank you for raising me all these years. From now on, it's my turn to repay you. So please continue to be my family.